start by introducing our first speaker, Amy Mayo. Amy serves on the board of the Manchester Area Human Resources Association and is the Human Resources Manager for Procon LLC, an award-winning architectural and construction management firm based in Hooksett. At Procon, Amy is responsible for leading all HR functions and initiatives, working alongside the executive leadership team to develop strategic people, strategies, and support organizational growth. Amy, thanks so much for being here and joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. All right. So first question I have for you is a good general jumping off point. As an expert in the HR field, HR manager of a company, what is the biggest change or trends that you are dealing with on a day-to-day basis and looking ahead when it comes to pandemic business planning and reshaping or changing your operations?
Great question. So some of the trends that I'm seeing in HR, and I think everyone, is the number one is turnover. Employees are leaving at an astronomical rate from their organizations for various reasons. Some of it's money driven, some of it's culture driven, but regardless, they're still leaving. So that's one of the largest trends I see happening now, and I don't see that stopping for a bit. Burnout is another trend I see happening that should be recognized as well, with more and more employees working from home that may not have otherwise worked remotely prior to the pandemic. Figuring out that work-life balance becomes a little more complicated. So providing resources for those employees is crucial to avoiding the burnout. And we are seeing, or I'm seeing, a lot of issues in the mental health arena. People are dealing with death due to the pandemic, not being able to see loved ones, not being able to see family members. And I know that's taking a huge toll on employees' mental health. So those are the top three trends that I'm seeing that businesses really want to identify and be proactive in addressing.
And what strategies have you been able to implement, or are you guys considering in the future that you think are responsive to some of those trends and challenges?
Yeah, so we have enlisted an entire toolbox of initiatives to try and help curb a lot of these issues. In regards to turnover, we've changed our benefit eligibility to allow employees who are coming on board to be benefit eligible day one. We have implemented flexible work hours, allowing employees to come in either earlier or later and leave earlier or later on the other end of the spectrum to foster a more supportive work environment for employees with children or who are traveling from a further distance, avoid traffic, and just cause less stress in the morning or evening for whatever their needs may be. We've rolled out a work from home policy that seems to be going very well. And we have increased our base salaries to be more competitive. And I know that's not something that all organizations have the capacity to do. So there are other creative ways you can really hone in on attracting and retaining talent through benefit offerings, work from home policies, additional holidays. All these things are essentially a low cost item that you can do to attract and retain talent. As far as burnout, we have deployed a lot of weekly tips and tricks to help employees remember that even though their home office is right at their kitchen table or in their living room or dining room, to turn things off, turn it off. You know, you are now working during your commute time compared to where your commute time might have been where you were doing personal development, listening to podcasts, or just jamming out to tunes. Now they're on their computer with their coffee, working during their commute, probably working during their lunch where they may have not done that previously, and working during their commute home. So we really encourage that. Step away from your computer, get out of your house during the day, go take a walk, or just shut it down, have your lunch and take a break. And for mental health issues, we are part of the Recovery Friendly Workplace that's in Manchester based. Well, it's actually nationwide now, but we are Recovery Friendly Workplace, which has opened a lot of conversations in our workplace to allow people to speak freely in regards to their mental health, but it's actually spawned conversations around family members' health and helping employees deal with family members who have mental health issues or substance abuse issues. So that, I think, has allowed us to take a bit of the stigma away from those issues in the workplace. And I've had a lot of people come into my office seeking help, and they're spent from the pandemic. They are mentally and physically exhausted from fear and stress and anxiety that has been brought on by the pandemic. So those are some of the ways that we've helped employees on our end to do that.
That's great. Last question before we move on to a different segment, but given your involvement with the Manchester Area Human Resources Association and as a human resources professional, there's a lot of business folks on our call today, small business owners. What would you recommend to fellow business owners, small business owners, in terms of resources on how they can explore some of these ideas and strategies that you've teed up, and finding the right solutions for their particular business?
Absolutely. If you've got the capacity to do so, I recommend reaching out to an HR consultant. If you don't have one, you can do it on an ad hoc type basis, and they can offer great resources for you and can help you be the pulse in the HR arena while you are still allowing you to run your business. But if that's not an option, you've got great resources that owners can participate in. Mara and hosts monthly educational seminars, and so do the other HR organizations throughout the state. There's Concord, Seacoast. So you can go look at their events and try and get some additional education. You could join the Recovery Friendly Workplace initiative and become a recovery friendly workplace. That is a free resource. And within that resource is a bunch of other resources. So you can get information on EAP programs or ways to help support your employees, and they'll train you and guide you. They also have a leadership training tool as well that can help, and that is a free resource for business owners to do that. And you can Google a lot, but there's a lot of information out there. So leaning on HR professionals in the area is a huge asset if you have the capability to do that.
Great. Thanks so much, Amy, for teeing up this initial part of the conversation. Really helpful. We're adding some of those resources into the chat, and we're going to circle back to you in a little bit for some more questions. So thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
All right, next I'm going to turn over and ask Hillary Holmes-Room from Bernstein Scher to join the conversation. Hillary is an attorney at Bernstein Scher with a specialty in HR in employment law. And Hillary, wanted to have you weigh in this conversation in terms of what are you hearing from some of your clients in terms of HR, employment law, legal issues that folks should have on their radar. This is a landscape that feels like it's evolving and changing a lot right now.
Yeah, well, thank you, Mike. And it's a pleasure to be here with everybody. I echo a lot of what Amy was talking about in terms of the issues that we're hearing from our clients. I will just run through a few of the main things that we're receiving questions about right now. But the biggest thing is that workers are either, remote, or they're on some sort of hybrid schedule where they're coming into the office every few days, but some have chosen to stay remote. And one thing that we've often found, unfortunately, is that some employers are not fully informed of the location of where their employees are working from. And what I mean by that is not, is it their office or their home, but what state are they actually working in? And that has tax implications that the employer may not have realized. So if you have employee withholding requirements in certain states that require an employer to withhold those taxes from an employee's paycheck for an employee who actually lives in that state, and they moved during the pandemic, but didn't notify an employer until tax time. Unfortunately, employers are receiving notices from different states on those issues. And we actually had one where an employee had moved to Canada, and the employer didn't know because they were a part of, every remote meeting. You just wouldn't know that the home they were actually working in was in a different country. So just making sure you have a pulse on where your employees are working, in what state. And, there are times where they may move and not let you know. So it's never, a bad thing to try to figure that out and get ahead of it. Something else that we're receiving a lot of questions on, and those on this call have probably heard about this, is, the OSHA vaccine mandate. What's the status? I can tell you right now, it's currently stayed. We're watching this. I encourage everyone on this call to watch it as well. We likely won't have anything come out on this until, the end of the year or maybe early next year. But in terms of planning, it's something to be thinking about. Make sure you're informed on the policies and the different requirements in the event it does go into effect, just so you're ready. Another issue is that earlier this week on December 14th, the EEOC did issue guidance on whether COVID could be considered a disability under the ADA. And so there is new guidance out there in terms of not COVID itself, but COVID related conditions. So if, somebody who has COVID develops into a heart condition or any other kind of long-term COVID effects that linger and turn into another condition, you want to be aware of that and know that you may need to engage in the interactive process under the ADA. So there is that new guidance out there. But one of the most interesting topics right now that I think is kind of hidden unless you've been keeping close attention relates to employee retention. And the Biden administration has said that they are going to start looking at non-competition agreements. And the Department of Justice has started taking criminal action against non-poaching agreements. And so what that means is that the Department of Justice has prohibited employers from entering into an agreement, generally competitors, saying, I won't poach your employees if you don't poach mine, or we're all going to pay the same rate so that employees won't jump from one employer to another because of all of the staffing concerns. And that, unless it's a part of a much broader scheme, there are exceptions to this, but in the general sense, kind of what they call it, the naked poaching agreement is not something that employers can enter into, or companies. So that is something that we are seeing is kind of not spoken about as much, but it is definitely something that the Department of Justice is really starting to crack down on. And unfortunately, it's also something that I think has entered different businesses' minds and conversations due to the staffing shortage. So if you're not aware of that, pay attention to it, because I do think we're going to see a lot of that in the coming year.
Excellent. Thank you for that overview and teeing up those trends. A question that comes to mind for me is, in the initial days of the pandemic and the months after that, we all made changes to how we were operating our businesses or organizations, and they were ad hoc in nature at that time, creating remote work policies on the fly, perhaps changing leave policies or other benefits to accommodate workers. But at some point, we all need to figure out how to update our internal operations manuals, our employee handbooks, and take what has been created and make it permanent, or is that something you're observing? Would you recommend businesses start to figure out how to go about that? I mean, that was usually a pretty standard part of business planning and operations, is you got to keep your employee handbook up to date, so that it's clear to everybody what are the benefits and what are the the legal elements of your relationship with your employer. But we've been in a 2-year phase of a lot of movement in that space. And how would you recommend business owners kind of tackle that in an evolving environment?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it is definitely something that business owners should be looking at if they haven't already. I mean, what comes to mind is immediately, when COVID hit, there were policies that had to go out right away, whether it was a general pandemic policy or it was, a remote work policy. A lot of those things have actually stayed. And so if if your company does not have a general, not just COVID specific, but a general pandemic policy, that is something you should think about incorporating into your employee handbook for now and for the future. Same thing for remote work. Amy was talking about how employees are working on, basically on the clock all the time. And if you have those employees that are hourly employees, you need to make sure that your handbook expressly states when their day starts and when it ends, and that you are able to track those hours, and that the overtime requirement, must be approved in advance, because otherwise you could have someone starting their day at 6:30 and, they're still at home working at 7, but they're hourly, and very quickly they go over the overtime requirements. So absolutely, Mike, businesses should be looking at their employee handbooks to make sure they have the changes in there. And if they need any assistance with that, they should contact their counsel, because the landscape of the legal world right now is constantly changing, but there are some certainties that should be in there if they're not in there already.
Great. And just to wrap up before we shift to our next speaker, in terms of resources that from an employment law legal standpoint, obviously checking with counsel or exploring having counsel if a business does not have one. Are there other resources that you would recommend business owners and business leaders stay abreast of and check in on to follow some of these issues and trends that you're following?
Yeah, I would direct business owners to the EEOC website. They do issue a lot of guidance on a regular basis with it's actually an FAQ format. So, if this happens, what do I do? And then it gives you the answer. And so those are constantly updated based on what's happening in the world, especially as it relates to COVID. So I definitely recommend making sure that, that's something that you're keeping up with.
Right. And I just added that link so that, just to clarify, that's the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission from the U.S. government. Great. All right. Well, thank you so much, Hillary, and we will circle back to you in a little bit to continue the conversation when we get to Q&A. So next, it's my honor and privilege to introduce Tom Raffio, the President and CEO of Northeast Delta Dental. Tom is a well-known business leader in our state and well respected for many years, business leader of the year, and has achieved great success at Northeast Delta Dental, and is also an author. And I know Tom has explored some of his experiences and lessons learned from his business career in his writings, and perhaps we'll share a little bit about that today. And so, Tom, welcome and thank you. And I think one of the things you wanted to touch on today was there's been a lot of discussion already about retention and building your workforce, preserving your workforce in this challenge. And you've had some experience and insight in how to scale your workforce during periods of hardship. So we're excited to hear from you today about that.
Well, thanks, Mike. And I've already enjoyed this conference to date, and every point that's been made already by Amy and Hillary, of course, is very valid. We've all seen the turnover and the mental health and the burnout. Having stated that, and of course, always rely on your attorney. We have an attorney, we have a general counsel, we have a vice president of human resources, Connie Roy-Jakowski, who's retiring but agreed to stay on during the pandemic, and Ryan King has started, and we have a pandemic committee. So everything I say is always sort of vetted, through that. Despite all of that, we actually have our employee turnover has been as low as it's ever been, and I'm not about to say that the turnover issue and the staffing issues aren't real. They are. Our dentists, for example, plenty of people are going to the dentist. Thank God. They had stopped between March 16th and May 11th of 2020. but robustly, people have gone back to the dentist, and dentists are pretty busy. Their challenge, for example, is they can't get dental hygienists and dental assistants. And if any sector of the economy is struggling with this, but we've been able to have the lowest turnover rate we've had of all time, I think because of information, communication, and I see some of my colleagues, on the line, so they can validate this. But every day since March 16th of 2020, I have written at least one email to our employee colleagues, and it's not about necessarily the strategies. It was first about hope, safety. We had to, like most industries, we originally had to furlough various people because no one was going to the dentist between March 16th and May 11th. And we had a separate database of people that were furloughed, and I would communicate with them, giving them hope. Then when the industry came back, we brought people back. And so the daily communications continued. And one of the things I learned is that while certainly people want to know the strategies and they want to know that the company is going to be fine, they also want to know the human side of you. So I began fortuitously, I put a photo of my granddaughter when she was 1, and I just started to continue to keep those photos in the emails, and 18 months later, she's gone from a little baby to, full head of hair. And so just, I think, acknowledging that everybody is struggling. Amy mentioned, of course, the mental health. I think just by being real and being honest, I mean, they've seen me Zooms with animals behind me, babies behind me, distractions. That's the reality. Now, in my particular case, I mean, I have a nice rhythm. I get up, I work out, I do some emails from home, and then come in. But the vast majority of our employees, let's say 180 out of 220, have been working virtually since March 16th. And our approach was March 16th of 2020 was first make sure employee colleagues were safe. Mike touched on it. It was easy to get everybody out, and for a while people could use their iPads and iPhones. But then once it looked like we're in this for the long haul, we had to have a separate process to make sure that they had all of the the desktop stuff they needed. We're highly regulated. We have HIPAA stuff to deal with, so that was all taken care of. And once we knew that employees were situated, we wanted our industry to come back. So then we worked on grants, for our dentists. So they got cash grants, not loans. And then we did premium relief, for our employees, because my thought was our employees are safe, dentists can now operate. But if employers drop dental and nobody goes to the dentist, what's the point? So then we gave, premium relief, to our group employers who have the coverage. And then you start thinking about other things like, well, if you give premium holidays, brokers, and I see we have some on the line, they actually get paid based on premium collected. So if you don't collect premium, then brokers aren't getting paid, and they're small employers. So why not pay them as if we were collecting? And then as our groups, our employers, as they had layoffs, people went on COBRA. We have a subsidiary, so we could keep track of who went on COBRA. So then we were able to give the COBRA subscribers relief. So we kind of put that all together. And I say this because employees, colleagues, getting back to the retention question, they loved understanding how the strategy, came into play. So when you were explaining this on a daily basis, this is why we're doing, premium relief. This is why we're giving grants to the dentist. This is why we're distributing free personal protection equipment to dentists. People don't realize supply chain is a little better now, but early on, dentists didn't have access, to masks and gloves and gowns. And so we used our buying power to get that. And I only mention this because they loved understanding the strategy, and they also loved the fact that I was sharing also the sort of the personal observation. So yes, you have to have the flexibility, the virtual flexibility, water cooler talks, affinity groups, and all that. But just kind of understanding the strategy of the company, and that we're all human was really cool. And so and I'm not making these numbers up, we actually have no positions open other than the ones that were just approved for 2022 and the lowest turnover that we had. That's not to discount the fact that that is a generic issue. And I'm not plugging my book, but you can get it at the Bookery and Gibson's and Amazon. But it's kind of the inside story of how we were able to give back the $27 million, keep the turnover low. And by the way, just for the record, it's not as easy as you think to give away money when you're in a regulatory environment, because the point was made by Hillary, you still have to follow all the rules. So all this money that we gave back, that had to have board of directors motions, that had to be approved by the Department of Insurance. So we were just recently audited by the Department of Insurance. Well, the first thing they were looking for was, did you have all that authority, et cetera? So I think Hillary makes a good point. I know she was talking more on the employee side of things, but even though we all need to do creative things during the pandemic, particularly during 2020, you still have to have documented processes, or you will later on get in trouble. And she mentioned a couple of them. And then as far as the book was supposed to get out much earlier, but then President Biden came out with his announcement, then the OSHA, and then the Sixth Circuit stated. So our approach is we've encouraged vaccinations, we role model it, and then ultimately, whatever the rules ultimately end up being, we will comport, with those rules. Most of our employees that are on campus are vaccinated, but if they're not, then we'll follow whatever the rule is, the testing. And just and I'm sure Hillary knows this. In New Hampshire, we have one other really unique thing that I reference in the book. There's a 1951 statute, 275:3, which is in the process of being studied, which may require employers to pay for the vaccination, which is an up in the air question. So in addition to the OSHA emergency standard information, a bunch of people are looking at that 1951 statute, which was obviously clearly, pre-pandemic. So I think there's so many opportunities in the virtual world, with the mental health component is real. One of the things we've said to our employees, we're blessed that we're not a restaurant. People can pay claims, they can answer phones. We had a pandemic committee, so we knew we needed a phone system so people could take the calls from home in a distributed way. So we got that in just in time for the pandemic. But if you want to come in on campus because of mental health, or you want to just do that from a human connection perspective, you're welcome to come on campus. We have all this room, so if you want to come in. So I think I think we've been able to, one, have the advantage of have people work from home, and they love it. It took them a while to get the rhythm, but when the snow flied last winter, I got so many emails from people saying, geez, I love working from home. Whereas early on was, I can't wait to get back on campus. So I think once employees find the rhythm, you can actually use this to your advantage. And like I said, in our case, we have extremely low turnover, lowest ever in my career. So more to come. Thanks, Mike.
Great. Thanks, Tom. That's a great overview, and looking forward to circling back with you as part of our Q&A and discussion. I love your message about, I've seen this play out and with our communications and with many others, about this need for more radical transparency and human communication in this age, and how that's been much more effective. So great insight, and we can dig into that a little bit more. I want to turn now to our last speaker before we open things up, Janelle Gorman, who is the CFO at York IE. Janelle, we want to have you talk a little bit about building company culture. And that's a big part of some of the retention challenges we've been talking about, and hiring challenges. And, as a company that's trying to attract and retain talent, particularly young talent, maybe you can share what your experience and strategies have been to kind of build company culture during a time where you may not have everybody in the same room all that often and all that much.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. Thanks so much for having me. I'm very happy to be here with all you folks, especially here at lunchtime too, the favorite hour of the day for many of us. So I actually joined York IE mid-pandemic. So I joined in March 2021. So it was even interesting to join a company that I knew had a really strong culture, but didn't really quite know how it got so strong. And then I, joining in a pandemic too, it's like, okay, well, how is this really going to work? And how do you kind of like lay your roots in a company during a pandemic when you might not see people face to face? So certainly in startup and high growth companies, which is what York IE is and what our clients are, it's incredibly important to have a strong culture. You tend not to have a lot of people in some of these companies. We work, York IE has about 30 employees. Some of our clients have 5, 10, 20 employees. And you get people that, from all sorts of different backgrounds, and maybe they aren't always in the same place, especially in startups. It feels like that's very remote heavy and has been for some time. So I think part of what's important about building culture is having a focus on building authentic culture. So not deciding what you want the culture to be and then making it so, but understanding what is the best version of a culture that you can get with the group of people that you have, and then nurturing that. I think, that's really, culture is going to become what it is on its own, and it can either happen by accident, or you can be intentional about it. And happening by accident can be really dangerous because perceptions are often not accurate. And so a new person might perceive, oh, everybody's really quiet here. That's actually something I noticed at York IE in some of my early days, because we were hiring so many people so fast. Everybody came in and was like, I'm the new person, so I'll be quiet until I understand the culture. And then the next person would get hired and come and say, I'm the new person, I'll be quiet until I understand the culture. And I looked around and realized, oh my gosh, we have a quiet culture. Like we don't mean to do that, right? But everybody's trying to wait and learn and not put too many waves in the water. So I think being really intentional about culture, both having your leaders lead by example, but then enabling all your employees as culture builders to say, our culture is only what it is if you make it every day. You can have a great big program that's, kind of dictated from the top, but if your employees aren't participating in it, then is it going to really work? Whereas it might be even more effective to just, nudge someone on the shoulder and say, hey, do you want to go get a cup of coffee? Or, hey, can we jump on a Zoom real quick? Because I haven't talked to an adult in a couple of days and I'd love to just chat. So really authentic culture is what we've been focusing on.
That's great. Yeah, I think that's incredibly important. And it's in this kind of pandemic era, this whole idea of being more intentional about it is so critical. Wondering, maybe you could share, some specific tips or strategies that you've either used at York IE or you've seen work successfully with some of your small business or startup clients. I think it's particularly interesting, York IE is an example, because as still a young company, you guys have been experiencing explosive growth over the last couple of years, as you referenced, having all sorts of new people coming in. So how do you team build in this environment with people who may not spend a whole lot of time together? And are there any clients or other startups, small businesses that are like, I'm sure a lot of our members, that they could observe what's worked in that space?
Yeah. I think it's a lot of the little things that we're seeing that make an impact. And especially when we look at startups, you often start out with a founder, co-founder, maybe 3 and a couple hires, and you start to build from there. And what you really get is a tight-knit group trying to get a ton of work done with very limited resources. Whatever resources you have in a startup, you're deploying to get more and more growth. And so when there's kind of scarcity of time and resources and high stress, all you can do as human nature is rely on one another and trust one another. And so that necessity of trust with your co-founders or fellow employees or small group trying to move a huge boulder with just a small army, that trust inherently gets built. And so it's that where we see becomes really valuable as a foundation for authentic culture. So regardless of what size, I would say starting with transparency, respect, flexibility, consistency, like do what you say and say what you'll do, is a great groundwork for building that trust. And that happens in the small day-to-day. So that happens when, if you think of a coworker, you jump on a Zoom instead of sending an email, or even you send a Slack message, which might be a little bit more casual, just to say, hey, how are you? Like, how was your weekend? It's the little things, or I know you're struggling with this, or like, did you get your booster? Like, how did that go for you? This is how it went for me. Building in small things, even just a start of a conversation, you don't even have to have a separate conversation about it, that connect you as a person, as a person to another person, to demonstrate that you care, to say like, hey, you were working on this really big project. Here's some ideas that I had. There's a ton of brainstorming and innovation in startups. And so that innovation and brainstorming and sharing together to say, we have an idea, let's work on that together. Here's where I can pitch in and you can pitch in, building together, that builds a ton of trust. So regardless of what size or industry you might be in, I think that those are some things that you can learn from startups, of how to really get foundational, super strong trust where employees feel like they have one another's back. It's also really incredibly valuable for retention, because there's a lot more to employee engagement and satisfaction than just money. Some of the salaries we're seeing right now are like bananas, like in all the industries. And so startups oftentimes can't afford them. I mean, big organizations oftentimes can't afford them. And so you kind of have to think like, what keeps a person here that says like, no, thanks, recruiter, I'm actually not open to new opportunities. It's going to be a lot more than just dollars.
Yeah, and actually that's a last question before we kind of open it up, but I wanted to ask you a kind of jumping off of that, similar to what Amy was commenting on in terms of from an HR perspective about hiring and bringing on new workers. Since you guys have been doing so much hiring, when you're interacting with a candidate and trying to extend that offer and making it an attractive offer, compensation is one thing, but are there other elements of when you're talking about extending that offer that you're finding from a trend standpoint that talent is asking about or interested in, whether it's benefits, in addition to culture and the opportunity that they're getting?
Yeah, totally. I think salary and benefits are like almost assumed now, because everybody has to be so competitive. Like, are you going to pay me well? And are you going to take care of like health, dental, 401k, the basics? That almost like is even just the conversation starter. And then from there, it's like, okay, well, what else? Especially if salary might not quite be market yet, or you might not be able to offer what the candidate might have been hoping for whatever position. I kind of get those out of the way. And then we say like, well, what is it like to work here? Why do you want to spend 40 hours a week with this company working on this thing? And I think a lot of it has to do with what is it that the company does? Like, what is the product? Is that interesting? So at York IE, it's a great benefit because people that we work with love to work with innovators and entrepreneurs and high growth, and they love that environment. That's one of the things that drew me to York IE was like, yeah, I want to go out and help build things and just like be fast paced and see what we can get accomplished. And so I think if you have a great mission and great core values for your company, finding a candidate that aligns with those and driving that home can be really valuable. People want to have fun. Like, as the earlier speakers were saying, there's such a blur between personal and professional now, and it's 24 hours in a day, 7 days a week. Let's just try to get done what we can and stay sane as we do it. But let's like sprinkle some fun back in here. So what are you doing for fun? And it doesn't have to be huge parties, but like, hey, do people ever go out and grab lunch sometimes? Or do you have, like, we have hosted some virtual trivia just to make sure everybody can participate wherever they may be. So we'll like on a lunch hour, hop on and do a Zoom trivia game. It's really just kind of trying to make sure that people are on board for the mission. You nail the basics of compensation and benefits, and then you make the actual work kind of fun and community driven as you go.
Great. Thank you for that. It's a great overview and really good topics. All right. So we have around 15, 20 minutes left. At this point, I'd like to invite folks in the audience to raise their hand or drop a question in the chat, and whether it be generally to our panel or if you'd like to direct something specifically to our panel. As that's kind of taking place, I'd love to just turn back to our earlier speakers, Amy, Tom, and Hillary, and give you guys a chance to react to anything that was brought up by other speakers that you'd like to pick up on or touch on, or something that you didn't get to, or maybe was triggered by some of the other comments that have been made here. I think there's been some nice through lines between all of your comments. So anything we haven't covered yet that you feel as though we should touch on?
I just want to emphasize the last point that was just made, that having a position with a purpose is the most crucial thing, and then having the fun. So, and you have to be a little bit more creative with the fun. Obviously, most of us are probably not having, in-person, holiday parties. So you can do that virtually. We did that during Halloween week. We had a virtual DJ and the trivia things that were just mentioned. So you have to be a little bit more creative, but you definitely need to have positions with purpose that also have some fun, and that will transcend any compensation issues. And then the culture in general, the one thing I just want to throw out there for people to be thinking about is, so let's take our company. So I know all 225 people like very closely. So the fact that I haven't seen a lot of them in person for 18 months is not really an issue. So when we connect in a forum like this, it's like old time. But as we grow the company and as we've hired people during the pandemic, some of these beautiful new colleagues I've only literally met in the parking lot. So what I'm saying is that we all have to, I think we have to be intentional, as been referenced, on culture, keep working at it, but also think ahead, because your core group of, if you have 50 employees, 10 employees, 200 employees, probably you can sustain the culture that you had, even though it still has to be intentional. But what you have to worry about is 5 years from now, when maybe you've hired 20 people who've never been on campus or been on campus one time. So I just want to put that out as something we need to be intentional currently about culture, but also think about your future employees that that you do hire. But the point of having a purpose in your job, that to me is the key to low turnover. So thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tom. I have a question that's come in that I think Janelle, Amy, and Tom, you perhaps all could speak to as business folks who are engaged in hiring right now. The question was, where are you going to find new hires right now? How are you sourcing your applicants? Are you looking at new strategies, new opportunities? I think we all kind of think of, quote, the old way of doing it, where you post your job and you hope you get applications that come through the door. And certainly it feels like in this environment, regardless of what industry in, that's not going to cut it anymore. And you have to be more creative in terms of how you're sourcing potential applicants. So Amy, maybe I can turn to you first and give some thoughts, and then I'll touch base with the other panelists as well.
Sure. And that's a great question. And it's unbelievably true that we used to post jobs and within 5 hours, we'd have 30 plus applicants. And now within 5 days, we have 3. So it's quite the contrast compared to what it used to be. And our largest applicant pooling and tunnel is internal referrals. So we don't offer a huge referral bonus. We started pre-pandemic, it was $500. And we increased it to 1,000, which is relatively small for what you're seeing today, 5,000, 10,000. I've seen sign-on bonuses of upwards of $25,000 for certain industries, which is quite mind-boggling to me to see those numbers. But our talent pool, the majority of people that we are getting are coming from internal candidates. And at our company retreat we had over the summer, the managing directors were talking about the referral bonus, and they put the number in perspective. They said over the course of the next 12 months, we are going to be hiring 30 people. That is $30,000 that is on the table for grabs. So that number really sparked an increase in internal referrals. So that's been our cash cow, so to speak, when it comes to getting candidates and applicants, and the turnover with internal referrals is much less that we've seen compared to external hires coming in. So that's really worked for us.
That's great. Wow, that's a really good insight. Janelle, what about you? Is there something similar or different that you have employed?
Yeah, similar for sure. And I think like she just hits it right on the head, because right now more than ever, it seems to me, I guess, people need to trust their employer, right? Like we've had a hard time. The world is having a hard time right now. And so people don't have time to go to an employer that they can't trust. And so I think that internal referral and that relationship building and networking and almost matchmaking rather than recruiting becomes incredibly important to say, let me understand where you're at. Let me understand where the employer's at, and let's know that it's a pretty good fit going in. And so that internal referral is hugely beneficial. At York IE, we try to just build community. We have kind of a luxury if you don't fit in our organization. We work with so many startups that you may fit in, and we love to matchmake and build relationships and community. So we're always doing that anyway to say, if we can hire you, great. If we know somewhere that you can be hired, great. Or like maybe it's just a good relationship to have. And Tom, to your point, I think you can build really great relationships by Zoom these days. People are pretty well used to it. But yeah, I mean, it depends on the role. We also find Twitter and LinkedIn to be really useful as well. I mean, people are more responsive on those platforms than they ever have been.
Great.
Hey,
Tom,
Mike, on that
you'd
trust
like to
point,
add?
that is one of the, again, the highest ways of retaining your employees. If as just stated, if there's so much lack of trust out there, if they can trust in the employer and your strategies, they will stick with you. So that was an awesome point just made.
Any other strategies that Northeast Delta Dental is using in terms of sourcing talent or applicants, Tom?
Right on target what was stated, and then also, really emphasizing the flexibility. Pretty much we're a technology company that focuses on oral health. So we're, the people we do hire, are cybersecurity analysts and folks like that, and just making sure that through the network, through employee referrals, and that we have the flexibility to clearly and easily, work from home, because obviously that pool of folks, they can name their own ticket. We're all fighting the cyber battles, right? But you really just through internal networking, as well as, really emphasizing the flexibility that they'll have and that the company has a great future, has allowed us, to fill those positions.
Great. Hillary, I wanted to circle back to you for a quick question. You mentioned the federal landscape in terms of the mandate that has been stayed currently on OSHA and vaccines. But I wanted to mention, and this is perhaps more of an FYI for businesses to be aware of, we're entering a state legislative session soon, and there's a number of state legislative proposals related to pandemic-related issues, employer mandates, for and against. And has that been an area that you have started to observe or look at? And I know right now we're at the stage where you just see the name of the bill. You don't get all the gory details yet. But I know the chamber is going to be following it closely with our public policy committee. Is that an area where business owners should really be paying attention here over the next couple of months?
Yeah, absolutely. We're always watching that, trying to figure out, first of all, once more information comes out, what may or may not actually move forward. Sometimes, as I'm sure you see kind of the same thing year over year, but then sometimes there's something that just completely catches you by surprise, and you really do want to stay on top of that. So I absolutely recommend that employers pay attention to that at the state house here in New Hampshire. I will say that we also recently received the Department of Labor from the federal side and their update as to what their intentions are over the next year. For those who may have watched this over the past few years, it's no surprise that there's more talk about raising the amount for the exemption under the FLSA and revisiting the joint employer rule. Those tend to be kind of the common things that are revisited when there's a changeover on the federal government. But that is something that the Department of Labor recently came out and said that they're going to be reviewing that over the next year and have invited comments for the rulemaking process. So we definitely keep an eye on both the state and the federal laws and what the different agencies are doing. And we recommend that all of our clients do the same.
That's great. Yeah. And I would just plug for all of our chamber members to keep an eye out in January when we start our weekly Capital Insight email that generally comes out on Fridays in partnership with our government relations team at RYP Granite Strategies. And what we try to do there is tee up for everyone what are some of the key issues that are pending. You know, as Hillary alluded to, there's a big list of potential things, but it isn't until legislative session gets started that we get a sense of which one of these proposals actually has legs and is going to move forward, and business owners should really be concerned about or tracking. So we have about 5 minutes left, and I think it's time to wrap up. And I wanted to thank our advocate sponsor, Citizens Bank, for underwriting today's program, their support of this today's program. It's been a great session with a lot of really good information and their continued support of chamber programming and strategic initiatives. And looking forward to sharing the recording of the session with our members and keeping it as a resource. So again, thank you to Citizens for their great support. If we could do kind of a lightning round wrap up, I'd like to go back to each of our panelists. And if you have just a closing comment, and how I would frame it as, you know, the theme of today's session was pandemic planning for 2022. So one piece of advice that you would give to chamber members, business owners, on what they should think about heading into next year, whether it's specific, focused on a particular topic or issue, or it's more broad in terms of their approach and you know, how they should approach what hopefully will be a good year and perhaps some return to normalcy. But I think we know after the last 2 years, we have to be prepared for anything. So that closing piece of advice that you would give, I'm going to go right in the same order that we started with. So Amy, why don't you lead off for us?
Sure. If I could give one piece of advice, I'll probably bounce off the trust piece that everybody else was talking about, because that is such a huge foundation to any relationship. Is if the trust is there, you've got a strong relationship. But focus on continued connection. So as we appear to be moving in a direction that is going to further limit that human connection, figure out ways to be creative and connect with your employees and engage them and allow them to have an open forum to connect back in a real, authentic, and human way. So what we were talking about earlier is seeing leaders in a way that makes them human. We all often forget that in our roles, people view us differently. So recognizing that people view you as, most of the time they put you on sort of this pedestal, and you're almost not human, and you're just a machine, and you're successful and talented and this and that, reminding people that you are human. You have pets in the background, you have babies in the background and kids, and you have Wi-Fi issues, and you leave yourself on mute during meetings, just like everybody else does, allowing that human element to come out with leadership, and not having to be perfect and having all the answers, and just building that strong connection with your employees and team members is going to be huge coming into this, especially this winter season, where we're probably not going to be in person a lot. So that would be my recommendation.
That's excellent. Thank you, Amy. Hillary, over to you.
Thank you. So my piece of advice is, don't feel like you have to go at this alone. There are a number of colleagues and resources and like-minded people who are there to help you. You know, I mentioned the EEOC FAQs, for example. When I get a question, I always go back to that and look. You know, you don't have to know everything off the top of your head, but you have the local resources to help you. Have your set of advisors that you feel like you can go to if you have an issue. Don't feel like you have to follow everything on your own or make every decision without any advice from those you trust.
Excellent. Yeah, that's great advice. Tom?
Communicate, communicate, communicate. Use common sense. I think the points just made, leaders as human, being authentic. Know that you need to plan for the next crisis. The biological crisis will probably continue, but 3 years from now, it might be cybersecurity. So you always have to be constantly refreshing your disaster recovery plans. But the other point that was just made, we're all in this together. So share. A forum like this is awesome. If you're in a leadership position, call a fellow leader, ask her or him, what are you doing about this? You have these resources. Mike's put out a lot of the resources. I know common sense isn't always common these days, but use your common sense. And the other point that has just been made, that you need to still rely on your experts. So you have if you don't have a pandemic committee, you should. You have your HR expert, you have your lawyer. So you want to be authentic, you want to make the right decisions, but you also have to have the the expertise. So be authentic, and you can never communicate enough, both to your internal employees as well as your external customers.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. All right, Janelle, you get the last word.
Last one. I'll say I think 2022 is certainly going to be another year of change and challenge. And I think it's very clear that it means different things to different people. So to piggyback off of what everybody else is saying, communicate, but I think setting it clear expectations with your whole team from end to end, financial expectations, culture, time in office or not. What do we think this year is going to look like for the business, for customers, setting clear expectations to try to get everybody aligned in a year where there's so much disaggregation of ideals and comfort levels and stuff will be really important.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much to Janelle, Amy, Tom, Hillary. Great panel. You all brought wonderful perspectives to this conversation. Really appreciate it, and appreciate everyone's attention and spending some time with us before we head off to hopefully holidays, and taking some time to enjoy and charge up for the new year. Again, I want to thank Citizens Bank for their continued support as our advocate sponsor for today. As a reminder, this is going to be recorded and posted, and so we encourage you to share with colleagues and friends. So be on the lookout for this session in Chamber communications in the future. And again, appreciate everyone's participation, and look forward to continuing the conversation. Feel free to reach out to the Chamber if you need help. And we want to wish everyone a happy, healthy holiday season and a happy new year. And we look forward to seeing everybody again soon. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy holidays. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Happy holidays.